So I think we should start. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to introduce to you Avraham Burg. I mean, he doesn't need a real introduction. Most of you know him, and he's here also because he's senior visiting fellow at the IWM. And I quote the first sentence of his CV in today's program. The sentence is, "It's a political career that reflects the endless complexities of life in the modern Middle East." I mean, perhaps you will tell me this is a trivial sentence because it's valid for any political career in any part of the world. However, in terms of complexities, I think it's safe to say that the Middle East is a little bit different. And also what I want to say, Israel, with her special founding history, is for us in Austria not like any other country. I mean, especially and also for us in Austria. Most of you, as I said, know Avraham Burg, but let me mention some biographic details. Son of a famous father, German-born Josef Burg of Israel's National Religious Party, and a mother born in Hebron, Rivka. Avraham Burg served and rose in ranks in the army and graduated from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in sociology, before he entered into politics for the Labor Party. To be exact, at that time it was the alignment.
It was a party.
Yeah. He worked as an advisor to Shimon Peres and was first elected to the Knesset in 1988 and became its speaker in 1999, serving in this position until 2003. Avram was active in Peace Now. Of course, we are talking about peace with the Palestinians from the early 1980s, when it was not so, mainstream. After he left politics, he became a distinguished researcher and author, and of course he was also before an excellent speaker, and we are looking forward to hearing him. Our topic is hope and despair. Let me ask you something personal also. I checked the results of the 1988 election, which brought you into the Knesset. Peres' alignment had 30%, and Yitzhak Shamir's Likud had 31.1%. And 4 years later, Labor under Yitzhak Rabin won the elections with almost 35%. And Likud under Shamir fell to 25, I think. Huh? 11 days ago, the joint Labor Gesher list made less than 5%. Of course, I know it's not your party anymore, but are you sometimes desperate? If you think of what happened to the Israeli left in the last 20, 30 years?
Can we move to the next question? Hi, good afternoon. Gudrun, we know each other for many years, more years than we care to remember. And therefore, you know that I was so many years in politics that never mind what is your question, I have my own answers, okay? So let me try to answer indirectly. At the beginning, you said that I'm coming from a kind of a political complexity. And I feel it's not fair, it's judgmental, it's very patronizing. I look at your political system. Well, compared to yours, ours is simple, straightforward, fully understood, okay? Tell me the outcome of tomorrow, okay? Tell me for how long will Quds coalition will hold. Tell me when is the next coalition between him and the extreme right wing. For how long will the right wing will hold as a one party. Give me answer for this. I simply will respond to mine, okay?
Well, we know who will become chancellor, no?
Well, okay, the difference between your political system and ours is that in Austria, by the end of the elections, you know who won. In Israel, by the end of the elections, we begin the negotiation. What is really the result of the elections? Having said that, I'm also very, very upset about the topic of this afternoon. And I'll tell you why. I read that tomorrow, the same time, not here, but in different place, there is hope, despair, and humor in politics about Ukraine. Our topic is about hope and despair in Israel-Palestine. Ukraine is full of humor? I mean, Russians there, EU's there, American cutting the money, Ukraine gate, this is humorous. Ours? One president went to jail, one prime minister went to jail, another one is going to jail, finance minister was in jail. This is full of humor system. Now, when you take all of this into consideration, I will say as follows. Israel was for many, many years, up until the 90s, and the 90s is a crucial decade, not just for the Western world, but for us as well. I will say a bipartisan system or bipolar system, large chunk, flagship of the left was Labor, flagship of the right was Likud, and around you have a couple of satellites. Through the 90s, because of various things, the political system was shattered down and fragmented into tiny little pieces that created coalition formation, almost an impossible mission. What happened in the last elections 4 months ago was for the first time almost in 15 or 20 years, the political system goes back to two big flagships. One around former Chief of Staff Gantz, and one around Prime Minister Netanyahu. The outcome of the elections is such that none has a majority. And therefore, we are in maybe the deepest constitutional and political crisis we've seen in years. Into this comes your hidden question about the left. And I would say 2 words about it.
And of course about peace with the Palestinians.
That's the package. There is no left in Israel. I wonder historically whether there ever was a left in Israel. At what sense? When I say left here in Central Europe, it is a package deal of social fairness, secularization of the public sphere, freedoms and rights of the individual, respect minorities, fair distribution of public resources, etc., etc., etc. When you say left in Israel, it's one element only. Yes or no arrangement with the Palestinians. All the rest of it, you might be an arch-capitalist, but considered left. You might be an arch-ultra-orthodox, but considered left. You might be an extreme secular, but being a right-winger. Not clear. So it's not the same categories as what you're talking about. And on this, I will say, as much as the Palestinian topic is dormant or disappeared or silent in the public sphere, it bubbles and it will erupt.
Well, but I think, what your analysis about what's being left and right, these categories don't work. Not only not in Israel, but also it's becoming difficult in other countries. But okay, so perhaps Israel will go to vote for a third time, or perhaps not. Do you think it makes a difference if Benny Gantz succeeds in forming a government after all? Which is not excluded. Now we are now Netanyahu is trying, but he's probably will be the next one, no?
This Saturday afternoon here in Vienna, my feeling is that the third round is closer than a government. Maybe Sunday, maybe Monday, maybe next week I'll change my mind, but as today when I read the cards, it looks to me that within the cards, third elections are closer. I see no serious difference, ideologically speaking, politically speaking, content speaking, between the Gantz party and Netanyahu's party.
But we don't really know him as a politician. We know him only as a campaigner. Am I right?
We don't know him, and I don't know whether it's a compliment or not. Okay, the jury is still out, but we know some people around him within the party. The ideology is very much right-wing bourgeois, center-right ideology. That I would like to speculate that only didn't we have Prime Minister Netanyahu and his baggage, both the criminal personal baggage and the public attitude towards inciting one community against another community, towards being under the spell of the right-wing messianic grouping of his, Gantz's party would have never come to the world. In a way, they are there in order to remove Netanyahu, not so much to offer a full comprehensive alternative. And if tomorrow morning, Deus ex machina, Netanyahu is not there, some of them will disappear, some of them will merge into the Likud, and the political system will be a different one. Having said that, one thing is for sure, and this is, I cannot even begin to describe how crucial I think it is politically. The nature of the individual, the characteristics of the individuals might come historically crucial. Netanyahu of the last couple of years simply splitted and divided the society into elements of which are alien and almost hating each other. The nation needs a healer. And it looks like the behavior and the courtesy and the good nature of Mr. Gantz might offer a totally different leadership gestalt than the one of Netanyahu. So content-wise, politically-wise, not much of difference. But attitude-wise, a huge gap between them.
Okay, because the word healer, it sounds a little bit like a charismatic person, and we are a little bit afraid of charismatic
Give me 5 years with no charisma. Let me sleep. I need a rest. I mean, we had 70 years of uber charismatic society. Give me a vacation. Give me a couple of boring years. Okay, I'll pay for it.
Before we come to hope and despair in the West Bank and in Gaza, tell us about the mood in Israel. I mean, these elections, number 2, perhaps now number 3. Are people mobilized to go to a third election, or are they just tired and fed up and exhausted?
My father, whom you described earlier, who was, among other things, one of the sages of the nation, he was a funny guy. I mean, it's strange to say somebody come from a German origin to have a sense of humor, but nonetheless, okay? And when they told him, listen, in the street they say, he said, which street are you talking about? So tell me, whom are you talking about? I will say that, generally speaking, the overwhelming majority of the Israelis are living in a better economic conditions than the parents used to have. Something good happened to the society. Yes, we have growing gaps between have and have not. Yes, the social solidarity is quite fragmented. But each and every individual is in a better shape than used to be 10 years ago. So economically, there is no reason for an unrest. Politically speaking, there is a feeling that, okay, the system sucks, but we do not believe you more than we believe the other, because they're all liars, from Trump and down. I mean, it's an international system of fake leadership and faked confidence. So, well, they're all the same. Then it comes to the issue, which is, for me, is very, very painful. I'm not lighthearted about it. People do not feel daily the corrupting, eroding, contaminating price of the occupation. I mean, it erodes the society. It it's a malignant cancer in the soul of the nation. But on the daily life, the individual Israeli does not feel it, including the 20% non-Jewish Israelis. On the daily life, it is not there. And therefore, you have a situation which looks beautifully, but you ask me, it's very fragile. It's a skyscraper built on a dune. It's the dune of the Middle East, it's the dune of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it's the dune of the internal Israeli debates and cold wars. And I will say that in Israel we have today at least 2 cold wars. One is between observant and non-observant, what used to call in political science church and state. It is out there, very much alive. And the other one is between, I would say, progressive and conservative forces, about limitations of human rights and civil rights, about the roles of NGOs, about the power of the civil society, about the centrality of the government versus the responsibility of the one, about whether democracy is about the voice of majority or being sensitive to the voices of minorities as well. These tensions are out there. The daily Israeli does not feel it, is not troubled by it, but it does not mean that they're not there.
In fact, I was going to ask you what's more dangerous for the society, or, I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, the occupation and what it does to a society, or the conflict between religion and state.
Let's separate between the two, though they are not necessarily separable. Most of us were born into the paradigm of the solution between Israel and Palestine will be the two-state solution. Now, when I started my first years as a peace activist, and it was mid-70s rather than early 80s, I mean, it took a huge political energy to persuade people that the two-state solution is possible, is feasible. Labor Party, the first among them, who didn't even want to hear about it, was the Labor Party which laid all the foundations for the settlements movement. And people believe somehow that the two-state solution is a kind of a product in the political supermarket that has no expiration date. This is forever. Now, nobody ever produced a product with no expiration date. My feeling, again, as for now, Saturday afternoon in Vienna, that the two-state solution formula is dead. If tomorrow morning it will come back to life, I'll be the happiest to endorse it. As for now, I do not see how it happens. It is not that I didn't want it. It is not that I do not feel that the Palestinians are more than eligible and have all the rights in the world to have their own self-definition and self-determination, which is, by the end of the day, a state of their own. I do not see how it happens. And therefore, the argument is not anymore yes, two states and no two states. The argument today in Israel, and I do not stand for the side of the Palestinians here, I describe my inner society, is actually de facto between two concepts of one state. The contemporary one state, which says Israel is omnipotently presented between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, and there are two regimes, one full of privileges for the Jews, and one full of discriminations for the Palestinians. And the other argument is, I would like to have, if we have a one state, I would like every individual between the Jordan and the Mediterranean to have the right to have the same rights. So is it one state full of discriminations and two regimes, or is it one state with one regime equal for all? Is it easy? The answer is no. Is it feasible? Not yet. But the same amount of energy that we had to invest 40 years ago to persuade people the two-state solution is the solution, Now we have to invest with the same people, the same amount of energy to tell them it expired.
Well, I'm playing the Advocatus Diaboli here, of course, and I mean, what anyone would tell you is, okay, that's the end of the Jewish state. And the Jewish state was recently enforced by this national law, which, I mean, already in Israel excludes a little bit others. For example, the group of the very, very frustrated and depressed Druze, if I mention them.
The nation law, yes, tried to emphasize and deeply institutionalize the notion of the superiority of one element in the society, and this is the Jewish element. Structurally wise, the Jewish democratic formula is as stable as a matchmaking or lovemaking between nitro and glycerin. It cannot work. And I'll tell you why it is an empty formula. First with a smile, then with no smile. What is a Jewish state? I was driving the other day from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, and in front of me drove a taxi. And on the taxi was a huge bumper sticker, "This taxi keeps Shabbat." So, wow, that's an interesting taxi. What does that mean? It makes Kiddush? Or it eats challah? Or it goes to the holy bath before Shabbat? Or goes to the Wailing Wall to pray? The taxi is not Jewish. The taxi driver is. A state has no Jewishness. A state is like, it's a tool, it's like a table, it's like a bottle, it's an instrument in the hands of the people. So the state cannot be Jewish unless it is the Muslim Republic of Iran or the Jewish Republic of the Jews. Unless something built in makes the state secular modern instrument very Jewish. Otherwise, democracy has one source of authority, and this is us, the humans. We are the source of authority of the democratic process. The Jewish, the way it is interpreted by the Israeli legislator, which delegated the responsibility to interpret the Jewish element in the Jewish and democratic to the hands of institutions, chief rabbinate, and individuals, rabbis, who are not fully committed to the democratic source of authority, but fully committed to the divine, theocratic source of authority, creates a formula, Jewish and democratic, of a state that has two sources of authority. One vertical, from top to down, and one horizontal, us. Doesn't work. No system, no company, no society, no organization, not even a family, not even an individual can function with two sources of authority. And eventually there will be a separation between church and state. It cannot function. Having said that, I believe that the nature of the place should be defined by the national communities, but not necessarily by the state. Which means I have no problem to live in a state in which the Jews are having their national definition, and the Palestinian Christians and Arabs, whatever, Christian and Muslims have their own, and live together next to each other. Can be even agreed about language, can even agree about sharing power, can even agree about sharing content. And I'll give you an example. I have 40% of my grandchildren speak fluent Arabic. They go to a bilingual school. One day, a year ago, came one of them back home, and I asked him, Yuval, what did you have in school today? And he said, Grandpa, we had a birthday. I said, wow, that's great. Whom you celebrate? He said, Muhammad had a birthday. I said, wow, that's great. What did you bring him as a present? He said, Grandpa, not Muhammad, my friend who lives around the corner. Muhammad who passed away many years ago. And I said to myself, wow, my father, a graduate of the Rabbiner Seminar in Berlin, an Orthodox rabbi, the leader of the National Religious Party, practicing Orthodox, has a grandson who celebrates the birthday of Prophet Muhammad? Is Isn't it a miracle by itself? The answer is yes. It is possible to live in a shared spiritual society. Exclusion
This
is
was
not
the
necessarily.
past. I mean, this is exactly what yesterday I received a book by a Moroccan, an American from a Moroccan Jewish lineage with the title "When We Were Arabs." I mean, they lived together, and of course, they celebrated also together in Baghdad or wherever they were. No, so perhaps this is normality.
Let's say that in a world in which Donald Trump wants to make America great again, and Putin wants the 10th century Tsar back again, and Erdogan wants the Ottoman Empire back again, and the ISIS wants the Khalifa back again, I would like to have the golden era back again between the Jews and the Muslims, and I believe it's possible. It's more positive, more constructive, more full of containment of each other, so why not? So I believe, yes, I believe it's possible.
What I was wondering, when you explained the nation law, you defined it in a very religious way, and I was wondering, I mean, this law doesn't exclude non-religious Jews, so it's more a national question. I mean, I don't like to say racial question, but I heard there was even a discussion of the chief rabbinate in Israel if you could agree to permit DNA tests to prove you are Jewish or not, which I find terrible, no? So
you can imagine that I'm in love with rabbis responsible for the biological data of Jews in Israel. You know, you can imagine that I'm in love with that, okay? Maybe I will even go and study some rabbinical studies to become the one. But it's outrageous. I don't know how many of our...
it's also ridiculous. I mean, I hope they laugh in Israel about
No. Listen, humor is in Ukraine, not with us, okay? Remember? Our sense of humor is a little bit limited recently. The nation law, whomever of you who did not hear about it, Google it and have fun. Okay, but recently was a kind of extreme right strategy to reframe Israel more on the Jewish side than the Jewish democratic side. When you said in 48 Jewish, it meant something like Italian in Italy, or French in France, or Austrian in Austria. Something which is between culture and history and citizenship and belonging and whatever. And this was more or less, in 48, it was part of the spirit of the time. When you say Jewish today in Israel, or you say the nation law, it's a redefined, not just linguistically, but much deeper. We are living today in a situation that intellectually speaking or historically speaking, we've never been in such a place. As much as the nation idea or the national idea is a new one, it's 200 years old, it's 300 years old, a nation state is as young. We in Israel have a new definition of being a Jewish national. It's a fusion, not even a merger. It's a total immersion of 5 elements, never immersed before. Language, territory, power, religion, and language, I said. Language, territory, power, politics, sovereignty politics. So this is so powerful. There were times in which we spoke Hebrew, but not over the entire land. Sometimes we had the entire land, but we didn't have power. Sometimes we had power, but we were not religious. Some other times we were religious, but it was in Aramaic rather than in Hebrew. Never did we have all the 5 components together. And today, if you do not speak pure Israeli Hebrew, you're no good, Nick. You're not for the greater land of Israel, you're a traitor. You're not religious, you're a Trojan horse. You do not believe in the absolute power, but you believe in a shared society. You are a well poisoner, you are a lefty, you are no good, Nick, okay? And when you take all of this together, you realize that the nation law created actually or tried to institutionalize a new entity. And this is dangerous.
So, Avraham, I mean, there are many prophets coming from your country, so also you should try to be one.
No, they don't pay well for prophets. No, please.
No, but,
it's better to be a rabbi.
But we try to figure out what could happen.
Sure.
I mean, okay. Now Mr. Trump and his son-in-law, they are waiting with the glorious deal of the century. Yeah. Do you expect to be presented? What will the Palestinians do? What about despair on the Palestinian side now?
What do I know? I mean, I have a feeling that part of the deal of the century comes from the school of thought of Zygmunt Bauman, the late Zygmunt Bauman, which is a liquid deal of the century. Today they have this, tomorrow it will be a little bit different, tomorrow it will be a little more different. He doesn't know who is the government. We don't know his personal situation. We have no clue about it. The deal of the century will be on the table only when it will be on the table. Now, we have to remember one thing only. The conflict is between Israel and the Palestinians. If we do not succeed to directly negotiate with each other, because of whatever reason, the political coalition of the Prime Minister, the settlers, the Hamas, the weakness of Abu Mazen, whatever will it be, we need an honest broker. We need an intermediator who is well accepted and kosherized by both sides. Americans, to begin with, are problematic. Both houses giving for 70 years standing ovations for whomever is the Prime Minister of Israel cannot be fully received by the Palestinian side as honest broker. It leaves us the Europeans. Whatever the Europeans want, as long as Germany is what it is, there is no European policy. It might take another generation and a half, till the German system will behave differently. But as long as Germany is so much hooked to the past, and therefore driven by its conscience, rather than by its realpolitik, it means that there is no Europe. In a world in which we cannot negotiate directly between us and the Palestinians, the Americans are one-sided, and the Europeans are quite castrated, whatever deal will be put on the table, I see it as a very, very difficult to negotiate, even if it's the best deal in town. The real investment should be about the manner and the modalities of the negotiation rather than the content. And there I see a lot of problems. Not impossible, but I would pay a lot of attention to this side of who is the mediator and how, rather than the content itself.
Do you expect, Netanyahu succeeds in forming the government. Will he make true his promises about annexation?
It's very difficult to know. You know, Netanyahu, if I give him credit for one thing, I'll give him credit for two things. The first one is he never stands for his promises. And that's a real virtue. You need a special character to give promise after promise, make people believe you time and again, deceive them time and again, and get re-elected. He's a genius. So he promised, okay, big deal. He promised. Let's see. The other side is, which is much more important, Netanyahu, unlike quite a number of our previous prime ministers, is a well-read person, very bright, intellectual, historically driven. he has a strategy. Not all of it is tactics only. His strategy is, I will say, very much Samuel Huntington, that there is a clash of civilization between children of light, which is us Judeo-Christian democracies, and them. Them are the dark side of the universe, billions, some Muslims, all of them versus all of us. This is the drive which drove George W. Bush to Iraq on a democratic crusade, which brought the entire Middle East down to its knees, and all the world order of the Middle East simply crashed because of this notion. And Netanyahu will align with the more conservative elements in the West in general, in the United States of America in particular, and the more conservative the American system goes, the more conservative will he go, to the corner of evangelical Christian fundamentalists, if not more, in order to keep Israel in this camp. This is actually his true historic mission. And therefore, for Netanyahu, from his psyche, if I understand it correctly, from reading his books and listening very careful to the deep notion and to the inner voice of his messages, for him, compromising a piece of land is not just compromising the historical greater land of Israel, is a compromise that eventually might lead to a domino effect that will affect the entire West, because we are, from his point of view, the outpost of the Western civilizations in the Middle East. And therefore, to see him compromising on the land of Israel is very difficult. On the other hand, he is a prime minister that has not too many wars under his belt. Unlike Olmert, unlike Peres, unlike Rabin, unlike Ehud Barak. He is very reluctant to declare a conflict with the region or with the world. And therefore, my speculation is that between his arch-conservative strategy and arch-tactical reluctance from a conflict, he will maintain the status quo.
So I should invite you to also ask questions, and I see a lot of hands. So please, do we have a mic? We start here or there, it doesn't matter. On the second, yeah.
You mentioned Europe being castrated by Germany, driven by bad conscience and not by realpolitik. Maybe you could say some more sentences about the situation and about the expectations you would have.
Expectations from myself, from my...
expectations concerning a European policy that's positive.
You want to take a couple of? No, up to you.
So we start, you respond, and when they become too many, I say.
What is your name, please? What is your name?
Franz.
Franz. At the era in where I was less naive than I am today. Today, thank God, I'm a neo-naive. But at the time in which I was cynical, my expectation was that one day the European leadership will swallow its pride and talk with the Americans, and the Americans will swallow their pride and talk with the Europeans, and together they will come with a one world, Western world policy. Not so much for us, though I love to enjoy it, but understanding that the Middle East, as much as I don't like the term because it is so colonial, it is as if somebody sitting in London and looks to the east and says, you're the Middle East. I take it with somebody sitting in Bombay and he looks west, we are the Middle West. But it's a very colonial positioning, but my feeling is that we are the outskirts of your system. And Europe for me and the West for me are not just continents, they are value systems. And Europe, since the end of the Second World War, I can take it much earlier with the disruptions of both wars, since I would say Renaissance and on, expanded, not just the physical metrage or kilometrage of mileage of Europe, but the value system. Up until 2008, which is a different crisis all over the world. And my expectation was, wow, if we want to promote the European Western values into our region, we need some tranquility out there. So please export to the region more of the human rights and civil rights of your way of life rather than weapons and army and military industries. And when you make a list of the 10 leading best human rights societies in the world, and the 10 leading military exports in the world, you will see many similarities. And I say, why do you export the wrong product for us? Keep your arms for yourself and give me your civil rights and human rights. Not the other way around. And please don't see my country as the military base of the outpost of the Western system in the Middle East. I don't want to be all this for you. I want to be something else. So these were my expectations. As for today, it's very complicated. I don't see one Europe, I don't see one Middle East, and I don't see one problem only. And among the many problems I see in the Middle East, fortunately or unfortunately, it's in the eyes of the beholder, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not the most burning one in the eyes of the world. It's an opportunity to say, wow, now that people do not pay much of attention, let's solve it. And on the other hand, it's a missed opportunity because nobody pays attention, so nobody is motivated. My expectation is that strategically speaking, and I'm sorry for what I say, but I mean it seriously, that in 100 years' time, we shall have a solution. And I'll tell you what I mean. And I'm serious about it. If I would have told you 10 days after the 6 Days War, June 15, 67, I ask your friends, how long will it go, all of this occupation out there? You will say a month. Well, somebody more moderate will say 3 months. Gudrun, who has a brilliant analysis of the Middle East, will say, come on, UN and this and that, 6 months. But if I told you in 67 it will go 52 years, you say, Avraham, you're out of your mind. It will never happen that a state which is part of the Western coalition, a democracy like Israel, will be permitted to occupy another people that's against their will, deprive them from all of their democratic rights. We, the West, we shall never allow it. Now we're 52 years into it. And I'm fed up with tactics. Give me a strategy for the next 50 years. I lived the last 50 years of occupation. I want a slow, responsible, bottom-up construction that will end up by a solution. Not for a tactical deal tomorrow, a visit yesterday, a manipulation the day after yesterday. I'm not interested in this anymore. I want a world strategy, a regional strategy, and a process towards it. These are my expectations.
But I think you didn't answer Franz's question regarding Germany, or did he? If it was completely clear what you mean by Germany cannot act like...
Okay. Let's call the elephant into the room and put it on the table and let's have fun. the current generation in Germany, the current leadership generation of, let's say, the Martin Schulzes and the Ismar Gabriel and the Angela Merkel and whomever, is still a generation molded by the Holocaust and by the horrors and the atrocities of the Second World War. In a big picture, I will say that all of us in this room were born into the era of responsible politics. And leaders, Eastern Bloc, Western Bloc, Europe, America, even Middle East, even Russia, were responsible their own way. We are now in a transformation period in which in more and more and more places, leaders are taking a new leadership role. They don't know anymore the history. The history is far away. The responsibility coming of the horrors and the atrocities of the last centuries are looking for them like the Mongols or the Turks at the gates of Vienna. Far away history, totally redeemed from politics of responsibility, and we are living in an era of irresponsible politics. In this transformation, Germany, because of its power, economy, centrality, stability, plays a huge role in Europe. As long as the German politics is connected to the era of responsibility, which is the outcome of the First and the Second World War, it will not move a millimeter beyond what it's doing today vis-a-vis Israel. Some will say rightly so, some will say not rightly so. I'm not here to judge, I'm here to look at it, to analyze it. But once the next generation will take over, and you will hear more and more voices say, well, yeah, Holocaust was not nice, Second World War was not nice, but it's not us. It's too far away. We don't know even our parents were not there, our grandparents were not there. We never met anybody who was there. It's far history. And at the same time, say the German way of life, like the European way of life, is supporting whomever is like us, tolerant, containing, civil rights centered, etc., etc. And whomever is not a democracy, we do not support. So if Israel will deteriorate toward less and less and less and less democratic behaviors, and at the same time more and more and more people in Germany will not know the responsibility for the past, we shall face a day in which the bank of credit from which Israel is borrowing so generously will be bankrupt. And I believe we're very close to it. Your name, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Nadine Saik Mustafa. I'm actually...
No, just speak into it.
Do you hear me now? Good. My name is Nadine Saik Mustafa. I'm a half Palestinian, half Lebanese, very fortunate to live in Austria for more than 40 years. I'm actually amazed to meet an Israeli with views like yours, I have to say, because it is very rare for me to hear views like yours. A couple of weeks back, or was it a couple of months back, I think you, Dr. Harrer, you invited Hanan al-Ashrawi to come to Vienna, and she spoke about a relatively similar topic at the Willy Brandt Institute, I think it was. And it was a very bleak, she had a very bleak view. And frankly, I remember going home, I had my parents who had come with me, and actually they were quite pleased to see her and to meet her again. But it was very depressive. And frankly, what you say today, in my view, is also a little bit depressive as seen from the eyes of the Palestinians, because I see that we are really relegated to the outposts of relevance. I still don't understand how people in Israel can actually, let's say, we have talked a lot about the Israelis today and the Israeli view. How do you see, what is the outlook of the Palestinians actually in Israel on their current situation? How would somebody who's 20 years old envision their life for the next 30 years, for instance, without despairing?
I want to add a question. I'm very grateful for this question. For example, in this vision of a binational state or whatever, I mean, there are different models. What would happen with Gaza, with the Gaza Strip? I'm sorry.
You are sorry, I'm sorry. Dear, first, I really hate to upset you. I mean, I didn't come here to ruin another afternoon of yours, okay? So let me share with you a smile, but it's a serious one, okay? We used to ask my mom. My mom was born in Hebron, Bil Khalil, and she didn't have easy life. She lost her mother when she was 6. Half the family was massacred in 29 in Hebron. Then later on, she lost our eldest sister. I mean, she had difficult life, but she was a very, very optimistic person. She was a nice, full of humor, full of happiness. And one day we asked her, Mom, tell me, what are you? Are you an optimist or a pessimist? She said, me? Of course I'm an optimist. Today is much better than tomorrow. So I would like to offer you something which is not that kind of optimism, okay? The situation, I'm sorry for the museum and for the EVM and for Vienna and Bruno Kreisky and whomever, the situation is fucked up. I'm sorry, okay? It's an awful situation. Still, and this still is crucial, many people are still in the business of counting states. 1 state, 2 states, 5 states, 22 states, federation, cantons, whatever it is. I stopped counting states. I count rights. And I believe the minute the conflict will move from state counting to rights counting, we have an opening for a different conversation entirely. I do not go to Gaza because it is forbidden for us. I go a lot to Ramallah, though it is forbidden. Okay, twice a month I'm in Ramallah. And I listen what's going on there, and I listen to the younger generation, and I listen to some of the intellectuals and the businessmen, etc. There is a deep, profound understanding among at least the intelligentsia elite layer that violence leads nowhere, doesn't impact the Israelis, just give them another excuse not to move, and in a kind of a very tragic boomerang effect comes back and impacts negatively the inner fabric of the Palestinian society. And I hear more and more and more voices saying the following thing. A, we don't care. They care deeply, but we do not care rhetorically. What will be the manifestation of it? We want to vote. We understand democracy. We learn democracy from you Israelis. And we understand that the notion of the democratic idea is that it's impossible that there will be an individual who doesn't have the right to vote who will impact his or her life. We want to vote. Now, I believe that the minute that the Palestinian leadership, be it Abu Mazen or be it whomever, will come to the Israeli Prime Minister and say, Mr. Prime Minister, here are my keys. These are the keys to the Muqata'a. Okay, it's all yours. I want one thing only. I'm here not as a subcontractor for your security. I'm here not as a subcontractor for the occupation. I'm here not to give European and other money to hundreds of thousands of Palestinian employees. I'm here for my people. My people want to vote. Tell me where. To the Knesset in Jerusalem or to the Majlis in Ramallah? Tell me when. Tell me where. The minute this discourse will happen, it's a whole new ballgame. Open something very private. We Israelis, because of whatever reasons, historic and existential reasons, we know what to do with violence. The abused child became a violent parent, and we feel comfortable in a violent environment. In a way, so do the Palestinians. The one thing that I personally believe will bring down the Israeli system is a non-violent civil disobedience. We don't have an answer for it. Here we are at the beginning of 2017. I have a meeting with my dear beloved friend Abu Mazen. And he said, Avraham, what are we going to do in the celebration or the commemoration of the June 67? I said, Ya Ahi, here it is. Here we are, the 5th of June, 2017. You wake up in the morning, you dress up very handsomely, you eat a good breakfast, you go to the Mukata. 8 o'clock in the morning, you open the doors and you start walking slowly, because you're not a young man anymore. From the Mukata, 5 kilometers south toward Kalandia, which is the checkpost. You walk, you don't say a word. People from all corners, from all the allies, all the little streets will join you, and you march. You come to the fence, to the checkpost, you sit down, and you say, I'm sitting here, I do not eat, I'm fasting, hunger strike, till the Israeli Prime Minister comes here and negotiate with me the fate of both nations. And tens of thousands of Palestinians will sit next to you, and we, hundreds of thousands of Israelis, will sit with you at the other side of the wall. And the wall will come down. He thought and thought and thought, and then smiled his beautiful, loving smile and said, and what about dinner? What about dinner? And that was the end of the conversation. Now, it's bitter, it's painful, but I believe that's the key. And it's possible.
But of course, you know what Netanyahu would tell you. He would say, we want to negotiate. They don't want to negotiate.
Listen, the main problem in any political limbo, and you covered more political limbos than I were in any. I mean, whatever I have is a tiny little thing to your limbopedia. You know that whenever we try to predict the future, we think about the present. We say, the future will be exactly as today. And I believe that what is needed is two different paradigms. A different paradigm of the value and a different paradigm of the imagination. The minute you think differently, you say, wow, it's possible. Hey, who said it's impossible? Why? Because yesterday it was impossible? Because today somebody doesn't want it? So, okay, slowly but surely, let's change the attitude till eventually we live a reality which is beyond partition, but it's about sharing. We don't have to share immediately with the Palestinians the nuclear arsenal of Israel. Let's say we do this day 5. Can we share infrastructure? Can we share environment? Can we share natural resources? Can we share health system? Can we share roads? Can we share education system? Can we share civil rights monitoring? Okay, give me 5 years of this only. Then we shall move on. The Israeli will be the chief of staff. The Palestinian will be the head of the police. Some power. Wow. Palestinian heading the police, law and order? I never thought it's possible. Let's see how it works. Could you ever imagine? Could you ever imagine in Germany a female chancellor? Wow, she's good. I mean, she's the Iron Chancellor. I mean, the second one. You just need some imagination for it, and all of a sudden you have a different paradigm. And that's the offer. People like myself, I'm not in practical politics anymore. I have the right to have intellectual curiosity and intellectual imagination and offer it for people as a political food for thought.
Well, Avraham, we have to close, but I think this is a perfect point to close. I mean, we could not have chosen a better moment because we are not closing on despair, but we are closing on hope now.
True.
Thank you very much for this.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.